I think 21.5 is the right side of the line here. 24.5 was the opening line. So if you got it at that, I feel pretty good for you. When you look at this USC team, they're not as good as Oregon on the defensive side of the ball, and that's going to make the difference here. Last week, Colorado couldn't do anything. I think they went into Oregon thinking they were a lot better than they were, that we saw the highlight tape on Twitter of them just talking a bunch of trash before the game, and Oregon wanted to win that football game. It was clear they wanted to come out and blow out Oregon, and they did a great job of it. But this week, nobody's really talking about Colorado anymore. The lust, the lure has all died down. And now, just a regular football game for Colorado. I think USC is probably looking at this game and, hey, you know what? What are we doing here? Like, this isn't a big game. Like, we can come in, we can blow these guys off the field. They may overlook them, and this is where Colorado can strike because USC is not as good on the defensive side of the ball. If Colorado can put up some points early in this one, I like their chances. And even though there's no Travis Hunter, you still have Xavier Weaver, you still have Jimmy Horn Jr., guys that can get open down the field. And I will say, for Shedeur Sanders last week against Oregon, he still completed near 70% of his passes. He was under duress. He had no blocking, and he stood in the pocket and stood tall. So if they give him a little time this week against USC, he can definitely put up points. Yeah, so looking at the Michigan-Nebraska game really quickly, I think Michigan's very good. They've struggled to cover some spreads this year, but when you look at Nebraska, they should not stand a chance against Michigan. So even though it's a relatively big number, I would still lean towards the Wolverines there. The game that I like a little more, though, is Georgia on the road against Auburn. I think this could be a slow start for Georgia, but in the second half, they should wear Auburn down. That's been a theme for the Bulldogs all season. They really haven't been a fast starter. You go to the South Carolina game, the UAB game last week, right? They've had to play from behind at times, which is very surprising. But let me assure everyone watching right now, the Georgia era is not over. They're still one of the best teams in the country. And we knew going into the season the offense wasn't going to be great. It's going to take Carson Beck time to get going. They still have one of the best tight ends in the country in Brock Bowers. But defensively is where they shine. And when you get into SEC play, hardcore SEC play, that's when we're really going to see this Georgia defense step up. So on the road at Auburn's not an easy environment. But again, I just don't think Tigers can handle this one. They're only doing 371 yards per game. Georgia's doing 100 more there. And then defensively, Auburn's been good, but they haven't played anybody. When you look at their schedule, it's UMass, Cal, Samford, and Texas A&M. They're in for a rude awakening against Georgia, and I think we're going to see the Bulldogs come out after a lot of criticism this week saying that their dominance is over. I think we're going to come see them show up at Auburn. Florida controls their own destiny, and you look in Kentucky, it's not a great Kentucky team. They haven't played anybody, and I think we're going to see that in this matchup. The Gators have been battle-tested. They lost on the road against Utah. They beat Tennessee at home in the Swamp, and they also have a little chip on their shoulder in the sense of Kentucky came into the Swamp last year and beat them. So this game being in Lexington, I do think Florida gets the win here. They opened as a 3-point underdog. They're now down to +1, +1.5, depending on the book you're at. And a big reason for that is just people think Florida's very good, and I think they have a realistic chance to do something in the SEC this year. It's not crazy to think if they beat Georgia, they could get to the SEC championship game and then beat anyone on the other side of the bracket there. Alabama, LSU, all those teams are very shaky. And I'm not saying Florida's going to beat Georgia when that time comes, but I do think they have a chance to play with them. Graham Mertz has been very good. A lot of people criticize Graham Mertz, but this isn't the same quarterback we saw at Wisconsin. This is a quarterback that everyone's written off and has a massive chip on his shoulder. I saw an interview this week on the Paul Feinbaum show. He said, when we go on the road, it's a mentality. It's a road warrior mentality. I think people are seeing that Graham Mertz can make the throws that he needs to. He's not a guy that should be throwing for 350 yards per game like we saw against Utah. But if he's throwing for 200, 225, and the Gators can get the run game going, this is a dangerous Florida offense. We know they can play on defense. They have athletes all over the field. And I'm going to take them to beat Kentucky very, very easily in this spot. It might take them till the second half, but I think a big Florida play sparks them in the third quarter, and they run away with it.
And I believe that because you were talking about Graham Mertz as well, that you've got a little bit of a play on him with regards to a player prop as well.
So Graham Mertz, 195.5 passing yards. I like the over on this spot. Mertz works really well in play action. It's something Billy Napier loves doing on the offensive side of the ball. And when you look at his numbers this year, he's really should have gone over in other games as well. The Gators didn't need to throw against McNeese State. They didn't need to throw against Tennessee. So we can say that his stat line against Tennessee wasn't that good, but the Gators dominated the game. In the second half, they wanted to come out, run the football, and run the clock out. Florida, I think, is going to go in there and have to throw the ball early in this this one, especially if Kentucky builds off the home momentum, the home crowd momentum. But this isn't that high of a mark for him. 195.5 is very, very doable against a Kentucky team that has not played anyone and hasn't looked good with their passing defense at times, especially against bad opponents. So I'm going to bet on Graham Mertz here. I just think his comment this week, going on the road, being a road warrior with that chip on his shoulder, it's a good spot for him to show up and make a statement on national TV. Greg, this game's terrible for me because one side I got Lane Kiffin, who I hate betting on. The other side I got Brian Kelly, who I really hate betting on. Brian Kelly has screwed me more times than not as head football coach. But I'm going to ride with the Tigers here. They survived last week against KJ Jefferson in Arkansas. That was a bad game for them. They did not look good. If Arkansas just came out and made a few plays, they're going to win that game. When you look at LSU, though, coming into this one, the reason to go with them is their consistency on the offensive side of the football. Well, they haven't looked great this season overall. Outside that Florida State game, the offense has been cooking. Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., both those receivers have been getting after it. Last week, they each accounted for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Jaden Daniels is a quarterback that started to pick people apart in the pocket. Last year, going into the season, the NFL scout said that he was too hesitant in the pocket. He wanted to lean on his legs. We're not seeing that at all with him right now. We're seeing him throw the ball, and that is a sign that LSU can be very good in this spot. When you look at Ole Miss, they're inconsistent. They're up and down. Lane Kiffin does stupid things, and I don't think Jackson Dart is ready for the moment. I'm going to take the LSU Tigers on the money line.